Hello, John Talley here with Boats.net, and welcome back to the next video of our rebuild series of a MerCruiser Bravo 2 drive. As you can see, I've got a brand new housing in the clamp and it's ready to get assembled. But we need to look at all the other parts we're going to put back in here so we can get this thing operational. Let's head over to the table, take a look at those, and then we'll dive into this project. Well, here you are, all the different parts that I'm going to be installing into that housing that's behind me. Now, is it absolutely necessary to replace all the bearings when you go to just replace the housing? No, but I'm going to go ahead and do that anyway since I'm there. I happen to know how many hours are on this unit, and honestly, it's time for those bearings to be replaced. May not be the case on yours, but the installation procedure is going to be the same regardless if you buy new bearings or if you're going to reuse your old ones. Now, as far as the special tools go, I will call out any of those that I use as we go along, as well as any standard tools as far as the size goes, so you can minimize the trips to the toolbox and get this accomplished faster. Well, now that we've got everything laid out, let's go open up that toolbox and dive into this. So I've got all the pieces that I'm actually going to use already removed, but if you did want to reuse your bearings, I want to go ahead and show you how to pull the races so you can reinstall yours in the new housing. Now, all I'm going to use is just a regular slide hammer puller. Just make sure it's got a set of claws that are opposable and can reach down inside of the diameter of the races themselves. Get the claws adjusted in, far out as they can go, and let's pop them out. There you go. Now, you notice that the race came out along with a couple of shims. Now, that mated this particular race to this particular housing. Are these shim thicknesses going to work for the new housing? Probably not, but that's why we're going to go through the process to check the actual pinion gear lash to make sure it's correct. As y'all are hearing, the needle bearings keep falling out, and we don't really have to worry about those because when you order a new housing from MerCruiser, they actually send it out with that particular bearing casing and the needle bearings in place. So that's the one thing you don't have to reinstall. Now we're going to remove the bearing race for your front bearing. We're going to use the same setup with our slide hammer and just pop it out. All right, that should do. Let's see if she'll pop. There we go. Same scenario as up top. You're going to see the race itself and then whatever shims that were required to get the correct clearance. Looks like there was just one. All right, guys, now if you were just replacing your housing and you were going to reuse your bearings, you could just leave them on the two different shafts and it will be just fine. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to remove these and then reinstall the new ones. We're going after that edge right here. Okay. All right, guys, the real trick here is to get this pressed back on. You do not want to press on this outer area, so you need to find a mandrel or some type of collar that will fit inside of there, but still go around the actual shaft itself. So you're just going to have to come up with that because MerCruiser does not have one called out for it. I just happen to have part of an exhaust system that was able to modify to where we can get this done. So you're on your own with that one. Sorry. And that is what we're going to be pressing against. Touchdown. Prop shaft's ready to go. Let's tackle the drive shaft next. Same game as the prop shaft. We'll get both of these pressed off, then get the new ones pressed in. Up, see what's happening? Yeah, that would be why you can't reuse bearings. Well, that's why safety glasses are important. Let's go in to there. All right. There we go. readjust, and get this other guy. Hopefully this will end a little bit better than the other one did. There we go. Not nearly as traumatic as that other one. Now the smaller bearing, that one's pretty easy to do because we can push against this surface. When we go to put on the other one, that's going to be similar to the prop shaft because we're going to have to go on the inside of the bearing surface itself. Okay, let's go. Now we've got our second bearing, and we just need to find a collar that'll go around this and fit on the inside of that. Now, let's go. That should do. All right, we need a couple of 2x4s. And that should be enough depth to get the booger out of there. Let's get this thing pushed out of here and hopefully it won't explode in my face. There, okay. It's always getting that first movement that's a little bit scary. Okay, let's get our new bearing, lube that up just a little bit, and get it pressed back on. Let's go. Here's where it gets a little bit tougher. We still have a little bit more to go to get it to bottom out. So we need to find a collar that's going to fit out to here and push it the rest of the way down. What I did is I took the old bearing and cut the actual needles out in the cage that holds them in. So hopefully that'll give us enough to get it to bottom out without sticking it to the actual gear itself. All right, are you bottomed? Find out in a second. Hey! Well, that should do it for our bearings. Let's start putting this thing together. Everything's broken down. Now we can start putting the new case together, and we're going to start by that driven gear all the way up front. And I measured the shim that came out of the old one, which really has no bearing on what's going to happen over here, but at least it'll give us a starting point. It was a single shim, and it was the 0.5 millimeter, which is the largest one out of the shim set. We're going to go ahead and start this one with the same thickness and then see where we end up. So let's go ahead and put in our 0.5 millimeter shim. Now we're just going to put a little bit of gear lube around the surface to make it easier to drive the race in. Now when you choose your bearing driver, you want to make sure that it's canted or has an angle to it. You also want to make sure that it's aluminum, because if you drive this in with steel, you're going to mar this surface. Guess what? That's the surface that your bearing rides on. It's not going to have a good ending. So we're going to go ahead and push this down in, and we want to make sure it's level the best we can from way up here, because we do not want it to go in off axis, because if so, then we'll have to pull it back out and try again. Now you can use any bearing driver that you want that actually fits around, just around the outside. Just make sure it's made out of aluminum. We actually offer the MerCruiser one. That's what I'm going to use to do this. All right, let's go ahead and drive this one in. See how that sound changed? That's when you know you've bottomed out. Now we're going to install the lower bearing cup, and because we're starting from scratch, the recommended starting point for shim thickness is going to be 1.27, which is going to be the 1 millimeter shim plus a 0.25. We're going to drop those in and then get a driver and send it home. This one should do. I think we're there. That's it. Now let's get our driven gear in position. Now on a new case, they already have the needle bearings and the casing already installed, so we can go ahead and put in the drive shaft. And then we'll put on our pinion gear. So we're getting ready to put in the pinion bolt. Normally, if you were doing the final installation, you would put thread locker on it. And according to MerCruiser's manual, you're supposed to take this little tiny bolt to 100 foot-pounds. No, that couldn't possibly be correct. So that has to be a misprint, or there may be talking about the bolt that's on a different configuration of this particular drive shaft. What we're looking at here is just a grade 5 bolt and only 3/8 in diameter. So that's going to be around 25 to 27 foot-pounds. That's what we're going to take it to, because there's no way that little bolt can take 100 foot-pounds. It would just shear right off. And chances are I'm going to end up pulling this back apart, so I'm not going to Loctite it at this particular point. We're going to go ahead and put it in as it is, then do our measurements, and then if it's correct, then we'll come back, pull this one back out, put some Loctite on it, and retorque it again to that 25 foot-pounds. But let's go ahead and get this one up in there. So now we have our torque wrench set to 25 foot-pounds. I'm going to get it on that 14mm head. Now, there we go. Now let's figure out what our starting shim thickness should be up top. We're going to put in this upper bearing cap, if you want to call it that. Do this very carefully. There we go. Then we put in this tab washer. And what we're going to do is measure the depth in between the edge of the case down to that tab washer, just using our caliper. We're going to call that 7.7 millimeters. Next, we want to measure the spacer, and we want to measure it from this surface up to this upper machined surface. So right here's what we're looking for. And let's measure in a couple of different places. We're going to call that 634. So the thickness, or our shim thickness up top, is going to be 7.7 minus the 6.34 plus 0.025. So the 6.34 plus 0.025 is going to be 6.365, so 7.7 minus the 6.365 equals 1.335. So that's where we want to head for our shim thickness up top. 1.34 is what we're going to end up with. I've just got them sandwiched together. All right, time out for a second. Need to pause this guy temporarily. MerCruiser has updated their procedure on this, and the change that they made is the amount of play that they're expecting you to add back in. And the number I'm talking about is right there. MerCruiser has now increased it to 0.051. So they want a little bit more play in there. Now, was this an issue for this unit? No, not at all. I've put over 200 hours on it since we did this video, so I know it's good to go. But at any rate, I want to try to keep y'all up to date. So now, please continue. With those in place, let's go ahead and get our spacer down, our O-ring, and then we're going to put on that preload plate. That's where it really comes into play now. Let's go ahead and get this plate torqued down, because this simulates the amount of down pressure on this cup as if it were mounted to, the rest of the lower unit. So we want to torque this to 35 foot-pounds. Let's see what we have. Oh, look at that. We want it in between 3 and 5. She's at 4. Let's keep going. All right, guys, we're getting ready to install the bearing carrier, and I can tell you from hard-learned lessons, do not put this together dry. Go ahead and grease the housing as well as the carrier before you put it together. Now, we are going to be using the original thrust washer when we do this test, because when we go to set the final, if you want to call it the torque on the outside, it needs to have a new thrust washer in there. But for the testing purposes, we can reuse the old one because we're after the rolling resistance and not so much the back pressure over here. Our spacer, and be really careful when you go in past these threads. So you damage those and it's not going to end well. And now our O-ring. Now I do want to pause here for a second because we're actually skipping a section in the MerCruiser book, and what they would do is use the special tool, put it up inside the housing, and you would measure the depth of the pinion gear and then potentially adjust that other shim, that other bearing. Well, we don't have that tool, so we're going to do it without it because I'm betting you don't have that tool either. Now, can I get one? Well, yes, but they're quite expensive. And I found as long as you get your rolling resistance correct, everything will be fine. And that's what I'm going to go with. Now, if you disagree with me, go buy the tool and go ahead and make that measurement. But that's the way we're going to do this one. Once again, be very careful of your threads out here. There's no reason to get in a big hurry. All right, everything's greased up. I actually have a layer of grease on this as well. It just makes it easier to get it in and out. Arrows up at the top, the little keyway down at the bottom. So even with grease on it, it's still trying to catch in the housing. That's why it's so important to lube up everything so it goes together smoothly. There it goes. We're past the threads. Our washer. And our retaining nut. You never ever want to force this on. It should easily screw in until the bottom's out. What we're going to do is actually just put a little bit of torque on it till it actually seats and you feel a little bit of resistance in the shaft itself. That's as tight as it needs to be for this particular measurement. That's the bottom. That's probably an O-ring getting compressed. We're going to call that good right there. All right, let's see what she feels like. Like butter. That may be a little bit loose. I'm not sure yet. But we'll know in a few minutes. Now here's where we're going to switch up measuring. We're actually going to measure the backlash by removing one of these, putting a plate here, use a magnetic base and then a dial indicator with a tab, and that's going to tell us where our backlash is. Before we get the dial indicator mounted up, let's go ahead and secure the prop shaft. And let me show you, well, a little trick I learned from Yamaha on how to hold this thing still. Now normally when you go to mount the prop, you've got this little washer that goes down in the base. Well, we're not going to put it in there. We're actually going to go ahead get the prop on there, and it's going to actually go out here. What that is going to do is going to force the prop into the end of the bearing carrier, and it's going to hold this still, and it's also going to pull out on it. And that is going to give you what the max run out would be on the lash, and that's what we're after. And there's no reason to get carried away here. We just want to hold it still because the amount of pressure that we're going to have to put is almost nothing. I mean, honestly, you probably don't even really need to tighten this down at all. Just the sheer stiction of having everything on here would be enough just to be able to move this back and forth. But we'll at least tighten it down just a tick. That way we know there's no slop back here. Everything that we're measuring is going to be up at the pinion junction. So that's all that took. More than enough. Now let's get our little clamp with this arm on it. All right, let's zero that. We are at 0.34. Well, all right, guys, that is the number we're looking for. So our shimming process is, well, we're finished. What we need to do next is get this out of the way, take the prop back off, remove our bearing carrier or our prop shaft carrier housing, then install the final thrust washer, put it back together, and then we'll go through an incremental tightening process as we're measuring the rolling resistance of the prop shaft this time to determine how tight that retaining ring needs to be. And I think our final rotating inch-pound with everything at the prop shaft is around 11 to 12 inch-pounds. That's what we're going to be aiming for. So let me get this out of the way, get that thrust washer changed out, and then we'll start that process. Take out our old ring. Here's a new load ring as far as compressing it. That's what she started as, and that's where she's going to end up. So important when you go to do this, have a new one of these. There's spacer, careful. And O-ring. Arrow up at the top. Tab washer and our retaining nut. All right, that's bottomed out. Let's do about a half a turn and then see where we end up. Now our range that we're looking for with new bearings is going to be in between 8 and 17 inch-pounds. Now we're going to keep tightening it down in small increments until we get it in that range. So let's see where we are. Oh, we're close. It's at the bottom end of the range. We're right around 12. So we're just going to put another maybe 5 or 10 degrees on this. Check it again, because we're already in the ballpark, and I don't want to take it too far. So otherwise, I'd have to get another thrust washer and start over again. That brought it up maybe an inch-pound. Let's do a little bit more. It's probably another 10 degrees right there. My internal rolling resistance meter says this is going to be right on it. $13, that's what I want. Now I'm happy. Now we just need to find one of these tabs that lines up the best. Bend it over to hold the retention ring in place. Then guys, we are done. The only thing I have to do now is remount it to the upper part of the housing and then make a couple 100-mile journey down to the coast and get it remounted to the boat itself. Well, listen, if you need these parts or any other parts and tools for your boat, why don't you come see us at boats.net and we can get you taken care of. If you have any questions or comments about the procedure I brought you through, why don't you leave them in the section below and I'll do my best to answer them. And hey, you like what you see? Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, that way you can keep up with whatever I'm working on next. We just want to say thank you for shopping here with us at boats.net, and we will see you in the next video. Y'all have a great day.